The following program is rated U for universal audiences and is considered suitable for listeners of all ages.
This is a presentation of Dream Realm Enterprises, where dreams are our reality.
Okay, welcome back to Q-Who. I'm your host, Jon Russell, and this time we are talking about Season 2 of Doctor Who. I'm going to continue with my look at that, at least the middle part of the season, for my watch-through / listen-through, because I've been listening to the audiobooks from the Target line. So yeah, been having a lot of fun listening to those. Last time we talked about the first third of the season, which was Planet of Giants, Dalek Invasion of Earth, and the Rescue. Now we're going to talk about the Romans, the Web Planet, and the Crusade. So beginning with the Romans, this one doesn't have an audiobook yet, sadly. I'm not sure when it will happen. Hopefully next year we'll get an audiobook reading of it, because it's one of my favorite Hartnell stories. I really love the Romans. So this will be just talking about the television serial, which is a 4-part story. And yeah, it really is one of my all-time favorite stories, not just one of my all-time favorite Hartnells, but one of my all-time favorite stories, period, just because of the tone of the piece. It is a historical, but it's very tongue-in-cheek. It was very much played for laughs, and it worked. It was, it was a nice departure. We had some really serious stories for a while, and finally, things lightened up, and this was about as light as Doctor Who got in the 60s, and it was very much to its credit. It worked very well, as, because it's so different from everything else around it. And I think it came at the right time, because Doctor Who needed to lighten up a little bit. We'd have had, like I said, some very serious outings. The Reign of Terror was very serious at the end of the previous season, and then Planet of Giants and the Dalek Invasion of Earth. Fairly serious stories, especially the Dalek Invasion of Earth, where we had, this intense battle with the Daleks in the future. And then, of course, the departure of Susan and everything that came along with that. And then the Rescue, which it had its light moments. It was, a quick adventure to introduce Vicky, and was very effective for that reason. But finally, we get to relax a little, it seems like. The TARDIS crew certainly did. And yeah, it kind of felt like we, the audience, were taking a break with them. And it's the first time in the series, and maybe the only real time in the series, where the TARDIS crew take a extended break. They took a nice vacation, as it's revealed in the story. They, by the time the story joins the TARDIS crew after the initial arrival, we find out that it's been, I think it was a month, something like that. They'd been in Roman times for a month, and relaxing around this villa or whatever it was. Sort of sitting in the lap of luxury for the time, and just relaxing. Finally, they got a rest, and you felt like they really needed it. And kind of as a viewing, as the audience, we kind of needed it as well, because the whole story's got kind of a relaxed, laid-back, fun feel to it. And that's probably one reason why I really love the story, because I love those stories that you can see that the TARDIS crew are just enjoying themselves. They're enjoying this carefree life of time travel and the good things that they get to do. And yes, there are struggles along the way as the story gets going, because Barbara and Ian are kidnapped and sold in the slave trade. So that that element is a fairly dark and serious element, but you never really feel that their lives are in mortal jeopardy as you do in most adventures. You feel like this is just an adventure, and they may not realize that, but that's that's just the kind of the feel of the story. And of course, the Doctor and Vicky are off having their own little adventure, and they're just enjoying the heck out of themselves and getting involved in this court intrigue with Caesar Nero and everything that goes on there. And and Caesar Nero is this goofy, sort of bumbling character. And the whole story, the whole production just has this sense of fun, and you never really feel like there's that much jeopardy. Like you don't really feel like there's a chance they won't come out of this unscathed. So from start to finish, that's kind of what you get. And that's why I really love the Romans, because it is a chance for the TARDIS crew to really enjoy themselves and enjoy the fact that, they can kind of sit back and go, this is the life. We're having this great adventure. And that really is the feel of the story. And I like that. I like that a lot. And it's probably one of the absolute best historicals. Of course, my absolute favorite is Marco Polo. That one's great, and I love The Reign of Terror. That one's great, but I would say between the three of them that we've had so far, this is the third, or actually this is the fourth actual historical, because we had the Aztecs in there as well. That one was a little darker and a little more grim. And I probably like it the least of the first four proper historicals that we had. And Marco Polo is my favorite, but the Romans is a very close second. I really love that story. And, we don't have anything but the telesnaps to watch as far as Marco Polo is concerned. So, yeah, my go-to in the historicals is always going to be the Romans, because, it is one we can actually watch, and it is just a fun romp. And 4 episodes, it fits the 4 episodes perfectly. So I think if it had been a 6-parter, it probably would have dragged on a bit. But it takes advantage of the 4 episodes, and it just paces out beautifully. It's a lot of fun. So I give that one 4.5 TARDISes out of 5. It is wonderful, and it's my favorite story from season 2. So it kind of reigns as the one of the top 2 Hartnell stories for me in the entire run of Hartnell. So and probably for the 60s as well. It's probably my second favorite 60s story. So I really love the Romans, obviously. All right, next up is the Web Planet, which that's the oddball. That's the oddball story, I think, period, in the Hartnell era, because it was really ambitious, and they really tried to do something different. They had these insect creatures. Of course, we had the Zarbi, the ant, the giant ants, and then we had the Menoptera, who were the bumblebees or whatever. And they had these beautiful costumes, but this is a case where, even though they had beautiful costumes, it's quite clear that they're costumes. So I guess as far as effects wise and costuming and so forth, it doesn't totally succeed. It's a fun romp. and sometimes it kind of stretches to that 6 episodes. I've kind of always felt like this is one of those times where it might have worked better as a 4-parter, or maybe even a 5-parter. But 6 kind of drags on a bit, because right in the middle of it, it does kind of drag on a bit, and I do have a soft spot for it just because of the ambition of it. I think it was a very ambitious story, a really interesting concept. They, bless their hearts, they tried, and in some ways they succeeded. The planet, looks beautiful. I'm trying to remember the name of that planet now. Vortis, yeah. But Vortis looks beautiful. I love the set because it's kind of like a moon type set, and it was really effective. It was so different from anything else that Doctor Who had done at that point, and it was the most ambitious, I think, that Doctor Who had gotten to that point. And the limitations of the technology of the time shows through in this one more than it does probably in any other story during the Hartnell years. It really was just a little over ambitious, and it just doesn't have the production values that you would hope that it would. And it's one of those that if it were made today, obviously they could do all kinds of great CGI and make it look amazing, and the Zarbi and the Menoptera would be CGI characters, and they'd look as they should look, instead of these costumes where it's obvious that it's a person inside. But again, I give it full marks for its ambition. It drags on a bit. It's kind of a slow crawl, but there are a lot of interesting things. I really love episode 1. I thought episode 1 was fascinating, and that kind of happens. It was kind of the same thing with the Sensorites, where part 1 was the best one of all 6, and it really set up the story very well, and it was really effective. It's the same here with the Web Planet. It's very effective. And so for the televised story, the 6 episodes, I give it 3 TARDISes out of 5. It was a great effort. It was an interesting story, some interesting performances. The TARDIS crew are good. Everybody's giving it their all, and they're obviously having a good time with it, especially William Hartnell seems to really have a good time with it. And it's one of his stronger performances, I think, to date at this point. So, I do have a soft spot for it. So, yeah, it gets that 3 TARDISes. The audiobook, while interesting and it adapts it very faithfully, kind of, the books usually pace up a little better. And this is a case where they tried to add a bit more to it, I think, but it failed in some ways. So the novelization isn't quite as good as the actual televised story, in my personal opinion, because it does tend to drag on a bit. And listening to it, it was a bit more of a slog than listening to some of the other ones. And I listened to it, right after The Rescue. And The Rescue was a bit of a slog as far as the audiobook was concerned, because that wasn't one of Ian Marter's better novelizations. And it was over descriptive. And I think in some parts, the Zarbi, Doctor Who and the Zarbi, as the novelization is called, it tends to be a little over descriptive as well, and it just kind of makes it drag on. And there were times while listening to that one, and I think it's, if I remember correctly, it's one of those longer 5-disc ones as well, where it's 5 discs to tell the story, and it's long. They're packed. These CDs are packed, so it's a bit of a long slog of a read. And I think it was Maureen O'Brien who read this one, and just like The Rescue. And while she, of course, she does a fine job, it just kind of slogs on a bit, drags on a bit, and there were times when I found myself kind of losing interest, but I could still follow it because I knew the story does adapt the story very faithfully. A couple of little changes here and there, especially towards the end. The ending it's quite different from the television version. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody who might want to read or listen to it, but it was also one of the first 3 Target books back in the 60s, before they were Target books, the first 3 that they ever adapted. So that, I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not, but it just kind of slogs on a bit. It's not horrible, but it's one of those I couldn't just sit down and I wasn't just dying to hear it, like some of the others. It really dragged on a bit, so I can only give it 2.5 TARDISes out of 5. So it's middle of the road, very, very mediocre. I hate to say that, but it's a bit of a mediocre novelization. So yeah, it's not the best effort. At that point, it was kind of like The Rescue. It was a bit tough to listen to, probably tougher to listen to, but I still give it 2.5 TARDISes. All right, The Crusade, or Doctor Who and the Crusaders, as the novelization is called. I love The Crusade. It's another historical that it's a 4-parter, and it fits the 4 parts really well. This is one of those cases where I think maybe in a couple of extra episodes might have fleshed it out a little bit more, because I've always kind of left The Crusade feeling like we didn't really get a proper ending to the story. I still feel that way after having watched it and listened to it. Of course, 2 episodes are missing. Episodes 2 and 4 are missing, sadly, so we have to watch reconstructions. I can't wait for the season 2 box set that's coming out sometime soon, hopefully before the end of the year, probably before the end of the year. I'm going to guess about November. And I look forward to seeing the new BBC reconstruction, because from what I'm hearing, they really put some love and care into it. So I really look forward to that and revisiting the story yet again. It'll be for the 3rd time this year. But The Crusade, I really do love The Crusade, though, even though it's always kind of left me feeling like it didn't have a proper ending. Everything seems to be open-ended to me. And I don't know, maybe it's just my perception of the story, or maybe it's because we don't have the true visual representation of half the story, episodes 2 and 4, especially part 4. It really hurts not having. I think I'd rather would have had, if we only had 2 episodes, I wish it was part 1 and part 4 rather than 1 and 3. 3 really isn't the best of the 4 episodes by far. It's probably the worst of the 4 episodes, if anything. But episode 4 is one I really would love to see them recover, if that's at all possible. And it would be, even if we didn't ever get part 2, I wish part 4 would turn up, because I'd really love to see this whole story, and I think it would benefit from it. But as it stands, it's always felt kind of unfinished to me. But I do love it. I love the performer. This has got some of the strongest performances you're going to see in the 60s. And in Doctor Who, in fact, you got the amazing Julian Glover, who, of course, everybody remembers from City of Death as Count Scarleone, or Scaroth. And but before, long before he did that, he was in Doctor Who and the Crusade as King Richard, and he makes a fantastic King Richard. I really think he stole the show. And this is one of those stories where kind of the TARDIS crew are kind of sidelined a little bit, and they focus on the historical elements of the story more so than the adventure of the TARDIS crew, which is to its benefit in a way. Especially in the first half of the story, that's pretty much what happens. The second half, you get Ian rescuing Barbara and all this kind of stuff. So it does kind of go back the other way a bit. But for the most part, this one focuses on the historical story. But again, it's kind of like an incomplete. It's kind of like for the first half of the story, they're concentrating on that. And the second half, they shift back to, we've got to rescue Barbara and then get out of here. So maybe that's why, to me, it feels slightly disjointed. But that really does not take away from my enjoyment of the story, because I think the Crusade is extremely strong, and because of the performances, because of the setting, I guess, and Julian Glover, and everybody involved. It's really a good, solid story, and so it's just interesting to see that backdrop and the TARDIS crew trying to fit in and figure out what they can do to get out of this situation. So it's quite interesting. So, but I think it's a very strong story. I really do, even though we only have half of it to really see. It's one that I was really hoping they would animate before this box set came out. That's coming out soon. But sadly, that's not to be. And people say, there's too many characters and it's too technical, it may never get animated. I think it will eventually get animated, because it's just too strong a story not to. They may not animate the whole thing like they've done with the more recent ones, like The Abominable Snowman and so forth. But I would be okay if they just animated episodes 2 and 4, and we finally had a visual representation of the entire story, especially if it was in that style of, say, The Reign of Terror and the Moon Base and 10th Planet. I'd be up for that completely. So, but the story itself, the episodes that we do have and what we've been able to see through that and Telesnap reconstructions, I give it 4 TARDISes out of 5. I think it's a solid story. The audiobook, the same thing. Actually, the audiobook, I think, probably is just a little bit better, very slightly at least. It does feel a little more complete because you get to read the entire thing or have it read to you if you listen to it. This is one that's read by William Russell, who is a wonderful reader. It's the last one chronologically that's read by William Russell, but it's a wonderful audiobook. It is 5 discs, so it's one of the longer ones because I think they did write them a bit longer back in the 60s, because this was one of the first 3. They originally did the Daleks and the Web Planet and the Crusade. Those were their first 3 novelizations ever, and this one was well chosen. I question why they chose the Web Planet to be a part of that, or the Zarbi. I would have thought they would have wanted to do like the Dalek Invasion of Earth or something, but they chose the Web Planet, so that one was kind of an odd choice. The Crusade, though, is a very strong outing. Doctor Who was really created to bring these historical stories to life and be a little bit educational, and I think this one fits that absolutely spot on. That was kind of the purpose of the story, I believe, and it was very effective, and the novelization is very effective. It's wonderful. So there's not a whole lot of changes here. It's pretty faithful to what we got on screen, but there's a little more meat on the bone, as it were. And it doesn't hurt it. It doesn't hurt it at all. It's actually a very good read, a very good listen, I should say. With William Russell reading it, it was really terrific. I really, really enjoyed listening to this one, and especially after having listened to The Rescue and the Web Planet, or the Zarbi, back to back. And such slogs as those were really hard to get through. This was a breath of fresh air because it paced up wonderfully. It was told wonderfully, written wonderfully. It just flowed. It just really flowed, and it was wonderful. And even though it might be an inch better than the televised version, I still give it 4 TARDISes out of 5. I think it's one of the better novelizations, certainly to this point in the run. So, probably the best of the original 3, as a matter of fact. I'd say it was the strongest one of the original 3 novelizations. So it's wonderful. It's wonderful. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Q-Who. Next time, probably, unless something else big happens in the world of classic Doctor Who, we will talk about the Space Museum, the Chase, and the Time Meddler. As we speak, I'm actually in the middle of listening to the audiobook of the Time Meddler, so the timing of it's going to be perfect, because I'll be finished with it in a couple of days, and I can record the next episode of Q-Who and look at the rest of Season 2. So, for my watch-thru / listen-thru, so it's quite fascinating. I'm having a heck of a wonderful time listening to those, and I had a great time watching the episodes, so it's nice to kind of have that companion piece. You watch it and you listen to the novelization. It's a nice way to do it. It's kind of a nice way to do it. But we will talk about those things next time, most likely. And hope you guys are enjoying hearing me ramble on about these stories, and as much as I'm enjoying rambling on about these stories. But until then, you guys know the drill. Stay tuned.
You have been listening to a fan production for Dream Realm Enterprises. This is a not-for-profit program.